Hey guys, it's Howler Mouse. Just dropped a video, but it's supposed to rain again outside. So we are officially here on a rainy Sunday. It is supposed to have been raining all day and stuff like that, and the app just has it all wrong, right? So I figure before I start bagging some of these poor comics that haven't been touched in 30 years, uh, well, rebagged in 30 years. Hey, John, what's up, guys? Go ahead and make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure that you have thumbed it up and shared it and stuff because what I'm doing is I am shooting from the hip here as I am digging out some stuff to take upstairs to prepare to bag tonight. I've run across a few things here from what I'm always talking about for years and years and years on here when I try to give you a brief biography. But I lived in a home where I had a stepdad, and a lot of the stuff that I have, I mean, it was a complicated relationship, but you got to give a devil his due sometimes. But the whole thing about bringing in these comics and enriching my life because we didn't have crap, and these comics were like cheap back then. My God, 40 cents, 35 cents, things like that. But anyway, he had a comic book collection that I would grab a few stacks of, and I would go into the bedroom on a rainy day, climb to the top bunk, and whatever, and read comics. And then he actually had a spinner rack around 79 or 80. We went to a place called Magimart. I had to go probably because we didn't have. I don't know why I ended up going. I don't know. Mom, there was a spell there where mom was always every time he would want to go out the door, she was sort of like, "Well, do you want to take Timmy?" And he didn't want me to go. You know what I'm saying? But so apparently he got a head. He had a heads up that they threw out a spinner rack outside of Magic Mart, right in the trash. He went back and got it. So we had a spinner rack in his bedroom, posters lining the wall of Kiss and Gene Simmons and stuff like that. He had a record player in the corner, and his nickname was Mad Dog. And well, that's based on should have been his actual name because that's all I've heard him called. Because I knew the demon Gene Simmons's real name and Paul Stanley Starchild's name and Ace Frehley. Um, what, did I get messed that up? Ace Frehley, Ace, Space Ace, and Peter Chris, the Catman. I knew their names, real names, before I knew his. I mean, seriously. But what happened was is that there were savage sort of Conan magazines everywhere, monster magazines that Stan Lee. It was called Monsters, I think, where they would take clips. A picture, a clip from Universal Monsters or just whatever they had back then, B movies and stuff, and Stan Lee would put new word balloons in and make them funny. There was everything like that. And then there's the uncle. The uncle had it, and they carried around or stored these books in paper grocery bags. Seriously, and I remember they would be fighting over who had what. I do know that the uncle usually had the war books. You know what I'm saying? And then anything that was Doctor Doom or Marvel was usually the stepdad. You know what I'm saying? So I kind of kept a bunch of his stuff over the years, and they disintegrated, and I've replaced stuff. And probably back around 2010, 2011, I did a big purge on eBay. And as we do these things, I sort of regretted a few things. There was an Incredible Hulk. I think it was 108, had the rhino on the cover. I wished I had not gotten rid of. But this was the stuff that molded and shaped and stuff, not by him, but by these things being available and being left my own devices to end up really getting hooked on this stuff. And these are some of the actual books. There's tons through here, right? I could sit here all day long and go through a lot of the vintage stuff, everything, and be like, this was his and this was his and stuff. But these are the ones that were accessible. These are the ones that I keep on a shelf close to me. These are the ones that I sort of today remember the most. And we have Afro SF over here. Greetings from the UK. Great to see you. New camera? No, not a new camera. Same camera. Hopefully, if it's looking right, that means something's working right. That usually is out of my hands. So hopefully it looks great. Okay. So a lot of the things that were in the house was Jack Kirby. Now, like I said, what got me into this is I'm going to rebag some stuff tonight, but I got this in. I got this epic collection in. I got a gift card from a friend back during my birthday. This finally came out. I had enough money to get this. This is the Epic Collection of Volume 7 of Captain America. This is when it was Captain America and the Falcon, and Jack Kirby was on the book, properly, 1976 to 1978. And I got this one because it's called The Swine. And I'm not saying this was the first Captain America story I read. This is the first one I remember. And, it seems like I just had the actual comic out. Now, what's unusual about the stepdad's collection is that he went to the Navy and he got discharged on medical, I guess, in the early 70s. And it's a tale as old as time because Vietnam was going on. And when these guys would graduate, sign up, or, end up being drafted, they would, be gone for a minimum of a year usually. And then all of a sudden, their mothers would go in and decide to purge everything. And they got rid of their toys and their comic books. Now, what I do feel for the stepdad is that it's a very small coal mining town, right? Smith Ridge, the camp, all this stuff. It's what you think. There's a coal mine, and then they just had all the houses side by side stuck on top of a mountain, or they were back in the woods. So when he came back and he would go see his friends, they would just like lean back in the chair and be like, "Great, good to see you." And they would pull out his books and read them in front of him. Small community. And it was this book in particular. I still have this somewhere, number 207. And this is the era that Jack Kirby scared the crap out of me, because when you see a picture, just the bulkiness. Now, there's also like Forgotten People, and I got a coverless issue of New Gods #1 still around here and things like that. The New Gods with the Dead Man issues in particular. I never figured out if he liked Neil Adams or just like Dead Man, but he really got into look at that. The swine just happened to look like John Lennon, which I thought was hilarious. And the way Kirby drew this stuff, I could almost see the beads of sweat in my little kid head. You know what I mean? But like I said, I just found a lot of what Kirby did grotesque as a kid. And like I said, I would have to flip it over. And that was definitely a Kirby house in my house. And he was one of the few people that actually one of the few things I saw him have was a shrine to Doctor Doom. He found there's a Doctor Doom coffee cup, Secret Wars figure. That's the only thing he really kind of had there on the side. So these were like on a spinner rack, and I had them. My first X-Men I read was out of his collection, X-Men #3. I got a reprint of that, of course. That's first appearance of Blob. That blew me away because in the book at the circus, there's a pot-bellied stove when the X-Men confront old Duke there, wanting to have him come with them. And Duke reaches in the pot-bellied stove and he pulls out a smoldering big stick. And he puts his hand on it and puts it out. And we had a pot-bellied stove at my grandparents' house, so I understood the heat of that. And I was like, whoa, so he's tough, little kid mind, right? So then, like I said, he was a Marvel guy, big time Marvel guy, right? So, like I said, here's the original. This is the stepdad's. And I'd read tons of Fantastic Four, of his Fantastic Four. Actually, the first appearance of Adam Warlock, I think it's issue 67 with the white cover with the cocoon on it. It creeped me out so bad that I ended up coloring that with crayons, trying to make it look better, But anyway, we had the Giant Size Avengers with the Stevie Englehart and very complicated Celestial Madonna story, part of it. And here's the upgrade. Okay, so this was the kind of stuff that I came in. I feel like it was like in Marvel proper. You know what I mean? Some of this stuff was I understood. I could read the what do you call it? The legal stuff at the bottom. I understood what year it was. I understood. And what I'm leaving out is thanks to my grandmother. By the time I was 4, I was able to read. Now, I'm not saying I had the greatest comprehension, but I was definitely ahead of the game. And it was all through playing Scrabble and starting with 2-letter words and in Sesame Street, things like that. So these were the perfect things with their bright colors and stuff. And a lot of these books are embedded in my head, which blows my mind, right? After all these years. So I always kind of say, watch what you put in your head because it'll stay there for life, right? So that's some of the books that did. Now, this has remained my favorite Avengers story, what I'm about to show you. And it absolutely validates me, and again blows my mind when I started seeing some of this stuff being brought up in the movies and everything, right? But this 6 years old, is when I knew I was hooked. I knew this is when I was looking forward to reading the comics. It was like, do I watch the Muppet movie on the scrambled Showtime channel that we didn't have at the time, or do I go over here and read this book? And I read these books over and over, and you're going to say I have multiples, and it's really bothered me because 186, I should have two of them, and it's not here. But these there's three originals, and the rest I've kind of picked up over the years and stuff. But it's the Yesterday Quest. If you've watched my channel at any point in time, you know that I have some, the Masters of Evil going, invading the Avengers Mansion. I was there as a kid collecting those off the stand. That was great, but this was the one. And the people that are on this: John Byrne, Mark Grunwald, Ralph Macchio, everybody that there's a lot of hands in this. I feel like Jim Shooter had something to do with it also, right? So, like I said, when they started messing with this a little bit in some of the MC. I don't know if it's a TV show or what they're doing, but it was kind of blowing my mind some of the stuff they were referencing. Probably the X-Men movies with Quicksilver and Magneto and stuff, right? I don't know, but yeah, the Yesterday Quest, right? So when these books started getting hot and everybody was wanting the first appearance of Mordru, so as you can see, it influenced my collecting by picking up whenever I ran across. And that's, like I said, I should have two of this. But yeah, there's the High Evolutionary was in there, as I'll show you some covers and stuff like that was in here. But yeah, this was one of the books that highly influenced me. I still read it from time to time. And I always probably will. You know what I mean? Like, there's not going to get rid of those, right? And then I could go over here and I can get the whole Thor book, right? Like I said, he was a Kirby guy, but he also liked his Thor. So I have a lot of the Bronze Age Thor. But I picked out this one because I ended up being a bit of a nut for the Crime Syndicate and the Squadron Sinister, Squadron Supreme for reading those. I absolutely loved and adored the idea of, infinite Earths and infinite dimensions and stuff, right? So, yeah, this is by Wayne Boring, the Superman artist that came in, but this was my idea of Thor meeting Superman as a kid, and I was reading this, right? There's the stepdad's original, and there's my upgrade, as you can see. But actual Wayne Boring, the Superman artist before Kurt Swan, and I'm oversimplifying that, actually came on and did a Marvel book. It's actually pretty cool, man. Thor ends up actually on that planet in that dimension, if you will, and we get like a very Clark Kent like super identity. Instead of Lex Luthor, we got a guy whose hair grows uncontrollably and so on and so forth and stuff, right? But basically, this is my Thor versus Superman a little bit if I want to get into that. I'm dying to like crack these open and show you, but there's a lot of stuff going on here. You can leave in the comments if there's something specifically you'd like to see. Oh yeah, I really like the Avengers Korvac saga. Hey Jambo, what's up, brother? Yeah, I think Breen made me go back and reread that, and I found out I had several issues of that. So yeah, I've read that. I kind of get if I was there as a kid, how it would probably grab me. And that seems to be a staple of the Avengers. I mean, that's a high point. To me, the best Avengers stuff is the first 200 issues. After that, it's real spotty. The Roger Stern, John Buscema, Tom Palmer. I feel like that may have been the last great run until Kurt Busiek and George Perez came on in the late 90s. But they were really pulling from the first 200 issues in a way, if you get what I'm saying here, right? This one, I can't remember if this was mine or the stepdad's because by 1979, I bought my first comic. This is my first comic, the actual issue, right? And as you can see, it's a Whitman. These Whitman books came in 3 packs, and I'm pretty sure they were 3 for $1. Well, at Raven, and if you go to my channel and watch my video I have up as my trailer, the first place I'll show you is a place called Raven's Drug Store that's abandoned now. And that guy, to make an extra 20 cents, because they were 40 cents a piece, to make an extra 20 cents, because they were 3 for $1, he actually opened them. I figured it out. I was trying to figure out, how did I get this? I didn't buy a 3 pack, but I remember having my own money. I remember being in the back of the car, sitting in there with my mom and two of their friends, because they were so young. You just need to watch that 70s show and stick in a little blonde haired Dutch boy looking kid. And I remember, crossing the road and going in there and yelling at them that I was in the store and going there just looking at the rows of comic books, and this is what I picked. And I've been a Legion of Superheroes fan since then. So anyway, this is another one thing with the Hyperion, you know. Now this one, it may be. I've got a bunch of coverless comics I want to show you. These were the stepdads. We read them. Okay, that was the whole deal in the house back in the day. If we were going to do grades, a VG copy or whatever it was fine. What you didn't want was something ripped and the spine ripped or water damaged. Obvious big things like that. Okay. But anyway, there's probably I still have the coverless copy, but it's missing some books, and I had to track it down. But what is funny about this is that as I'm looking at this, I don't think I actually tracked it down. I found it in the stack. The stepdad had the actual Spider-Man issue I'm going to show you, and I just figured out that this was the uncles that I was telling you about. The uncle right here, you see this? I think that's showing up. That is now. Check this out. When the uncle got married in the late 70s, he moved in, you know, with his wife. She was a nurse and stuff, and she had that gauze tape, right? And she is, I don't want to say neat freak. I don't mean that derogatory, but she kept a very nice house, right? And when I would go over there to visit once a year or whatever it was very odd. You know what I mean? Considering that we lived in trailers and stuff and everything, right? And I'd go into this spotless house that looked like something out of a magazine. You know what I mean? I mean, I remember when she made dinner one time. She didn't like me. She actually apologized to me when I was about 32 or 33 or something for the way she treated me or acted towards me. But she would make meals where we got salads before we got spaghetti. And I'm just sitting here like, oh, wow. And the sauce was separate from the noodles. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, oh my God, this is civilized, you know. But anyway, what she did is she went through his whole comic book, his collection, and she alphabetized it. And then in the first book, for the first M's, she would put a piece of gauze tape and it would hang up here and she would put M on it. So, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So, this book, this is one of the first Spider Man actual comics I remember reading. There was a pocketbook um, reprint that he had that I kind of remember reading, but this reprint's issue 73. So issue 73 is the first Spider-Man book I remember reading, and I have the coverless copy, but it's missing the pages. And the first page that I have on it, probably passed it up. Mean Mountain Marco. That name stuck in my head forever. So right here, this page here, you know, we got old Commissioner Stacy or whatever he was, Captain Stacy. Spider-Man's coming in to talk to him. This is my first issue. That's the book was already damaged by the I got to it, and it started on this page. So that was my first one. There'll be some other stuff I show, right? So it's great to have the Marvel's tales. That's good enough for me and stuff, right? And then there were horror books, and I've got a big stack here. These all came from the Stepdad's collection. But let me hold on. So here's another Avengers book. This is the Stepdad's actual Avengers book. This is the collector to me. Almost this is my, and it's got to be where I was a kid, but this is my favorite Giant Man outfit. I dig the blue and yellow also, right? But this is it. I don't even know what issue to tell you this. I used to know off the top of my head. But yeah, this is one of the first Avengers books that's been carried around. Two owners, stepdad and me. You know what I mean? He bought this one off the rack. So it's got to be around issue 48 or 49, probably, if I'm guessing, because it says, hey, dear Stan, Roy, and John, it's got a copy of Avengers 47. All right. So the letter page is for Avengers 47. You know, you got to use your head on some of this stuff, guys. I didn't live in a day where we could take our Google and take a picture and have the AI look it up and identify the page in the book. All right. Thomas Bagley. Boring doing a disguised Superman versus Thor is a real great little gem. Reminds me of Superman meeting Captain Thunder in the 60s. I have that over here. Yeah. Before DC acquired the rights to Captain Marvel. Yeah, I got the Captain Third, and also you had the Mad Magazine Superb Man versus Captain Marvels, which from what I understand is what made Mad Magazine pop. I guess you know. Hey Victor, good to see you. Also love Superman meeting a thinly veiled Popeye in the Action Comics in the '80s. That's also from the '70s, and I have that one also. On the cover, Superman is in the phone booth, and the thinly disguised Popeye is, I think his name was Captain Strong. No, that can't be right. Anyway, he's picked up the phone booth with Superman in it. It's fun. Okay, so we had the classic horror stuff, right? Tomb of Darkness. Okay, there's tons of this stuff, and I loved reading, trying to figure out, how these stories were and what they were reprinted in and what was going on. This was actually fun stuff. Now, I read these things side by side with Lynn Weens and Bernie Wrightson's Swamp Thing that the stepdad had in the house. And number two is the one that stuck out in my head. Number two is I acquired it. I got number two, but first appearance of Arcane in the Unhuman. There's so many monster names out there that I've run across over the years. But you had the biggest monster that stuck out of my head from the 70s out of all these horror books was the Swamp Thing, because you had the dude that was nothing but a head and a hand, and he walked around on his hand, the brain or something is what they called him. But anyway, but yeah, John Buscema, Joe Sennett, Tom Palmer, Gene Colan. I learned these guys' names by their style of art and everything like that. I mean, you understand, I would read and reread these things, and then I would try to figure out artists and stuff, because like I didn't realize this was Kirby because of his style being so much different. But I'm like, that blocky style reminds me of somebody. And then, of course, the big heroes as I was a kid. When I was a kid, was Evel Knievel. I had this toy. I had the lunch boxes. And so it was Evel Knievel, Fonzie. God, who was it? Mork from Mork. I had three. Every kid had three or four actual heroes back then and stuff, but Evel Knievel was number one. Okay. We have Weird Wonder Tales. I'm always kind of looking out for this. And to this very day, I'm always wanting to know who this model was. Who was this? Because as a kid, I thought he looked like Mr. Rogers, but it's not Mr. Rogers. And it says, "Look who's smiling now." And you can go to college and get a degree like him, and that haircut. You know what I mean? I was like, who is that? And I've always asked, does anybody know who this guy was? And Tom Sutton, I didn't know his name, but I knew his art style. Always sort of, he was another one of those artists that his stuff has such a visceral uh, element to his artwork. It actually had a texture that when I read some of his horror stuff, which one of these I'll show you in a minute, I had to go take a shower. I felt like I had been out in the mud in the swamp. It just kind of got me and stuff, right? Plus, probably the texture of the comics didn't work, right? But yeah, all this stuff, all this horror stuff. I mean, this just matched what was going on TV. Now, as a kid, a couple things were going on, right? I remember seeing Star Wars in the theater as a kid. Doesn't mean I saw it in 77. Theaters could call up movies whenever they want, and you might get a movie 6 months after it actually came out and things like that, right? So somewhere between 77, 78, I saw Star Wars in the theater. The other thing that was going on was, because of that and a few other things, I had reruns when I played with my antenna. I could watch reruns of Star Trek Godzilla on Sundays and the Superman 50 show. On primetime, you had Wonder Woman and the Hulk. Then you had Christopher Reeve's Superman in the theater. There was no getting away from it. Saturday mornings, Batman, Justice League, well, Super Friends, Plastic Man, the Globetrotters. They ended up making them superheroes and stuff, right? Hong Kong Fooey, Blue Falcon, and all that stuff. It was everywhere, right? So this stuff just feels natural because of that era. And then we had some Knight Rider stuff, right? And I think it was Two Gun Kid. I know I have it in the stack here, but there's only one guy I really liked reading, and I didn't realize it till I got older, but it's because they made him a superhero. He had a secret identity, right? But Knight Rider was this stuff was in the house, and the westerns have never grabbed me. And actually, I need to flip that around. So yeah, these are beat up and well loved, is the way I put it. But yeah, Ghost Rider number 2 and stuff, right? But yeah, I really dug the storytelling, the old time stuff. And this is where the smell of comics is starting to take over the room, man. I'm telling you, the 70s comics, yeah, 74, 73, and 74, the vintage smell of these comics, that's the good stuff, guys. I'm telling you. I don't know what it is about the paper quality from that time. Oh, yeah, and they got the Zorro wannabe guy in this one. What was his name? Anyway, that's the guy he's fighting. He was a Zorro kind of guy, in my opinion. Even as a kid, I could pick up a riff. You know what I'm saying? And then this one, absolutely love this. I've seen this take off. And I started noticing that some artists just did covers, and little did I know that was going to be a Steranko. I'm 95. Yeah, that's a Steranko. But like I said, I didn't know that it was Steranko. I didn't know to. I would study the art, but sometimes the little signatures would escape me. But I started picking up Gil Kane did covers, Steranko did covers before I knew anything that he ever did on in the '60s with his pop art. Things like the Scarecrow. I laughed at this one because Batman had a scarecrow. You know what I mean? And I would read these things and they were like fantastic. And there would be like some heavy metal magazines. You know what I'm saying? Little Savage sort of Conan. I remember we had the Savage Tales #1 with Conan holding the decapitated head up. That was in the house. We read that till it disintegrated. Like I said, these things were just laying around the house and they piled up in my room before I got my stuff, right? Hey, good afternoon. Also love Superman meeting the Thin Leaf. Yeah, we've already read those. Okay. You guys comment all you want. I'm saving the best stuff for later. We had things like the 100 pagers. Now, I personally love these, right? These in the Fourth World stuff that Jack Kirby was doing, they had reprints in them from the 40s and stuff. Then I love these big books because I could tell that some of the stuff was from the 50s and stuff. Little did I know that the Comic Code Authority was lightening up. I didn't know anything about the history of why horror comics would be come back in the Bronze Age and stuff. I just lived it. You know what I mean? Like I was kind of, I got the spoils of the war, if you will, without even knowing there's a war going on. You know what I mean? I got that kind of stuff. And then I've often said, you know, as much as I love Superman and the Superman movie is out, and we had Christopher Reeves at the time and everything like that. And maybe it has to be where I was a kid. Now, this is why I'm saying that it's not always the stuff you love from when you're a kid. Okay. Because I had modern versions of Superman. Those books were out. And then the Superman family, here's the stepdads, and here's one. Maybe they're switched around, but I grabbed a copy. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, you get these reprints from the 50s, and I absolutely dug the concept of the Insect Queen, and I like the Supergirl stories from the past, and the seven artist takes on Jimmy. You know, seeing how the artists all did their thing, and Krypton stories of a Candor and Nightwing and Flamebird and stuff like that. And then I was like, I never understood why Superman has a thing for Lois Lane, and I never will, but that helps kind of understand things. You know what I mean? So yeah, to me, this was my Superman and the stuff from the '60s. The '60s stuff, that's the stuff I like, man. And it came from probably reading these and the reprints and stuff, right? Then this was a book that it took me forever to find because I don't know what happened to it in the Stepdads collection, right? And I remembered the stories in it. And I had to remember the Super Baby story where he captured the space four armed, four handed space gorilla and stuff and was flying around the world to make it a cage and get it food and all this stuff. And he found out it was sentient, as in smart and things like that, right? So this is one of the things that I found at Heroes Con going through dollar bins. The cover, I remembered the cover, but it threw me off. This is the first issue of Superman Family going to $1 and in no longer in the square format. That's what threw me off. You know what I'm saying? So you should have seen me at Heroes Con when I'm surrounded by other guys. We're all going through these dollar books, and all of a sudden I yell, "Yes!" and made a little bit of a scene. I'm holding it up like you would have thought I struck oil. You know what I mean? And they're all like, "Oh, he must have found some. What'd you find? Some kind of key?" And half the people were looking at me like, "You idiot!" Like I got them excited about nothing. And then you had a couple of those guys like, "I know why you got excited. They knew. They knew." And that's the people I like to hang with. You know what I'm saying? All right, Victor Shade. I loved any 100 pager, so much content. Yeah, right. So we're going to show some other stuff here, right? And you're going to be in my mindset of how I read this, right? This is the actual condition the book was in when I first read it. I've always kind of assumed it was a Brave and the Bold or something. I don't know. I could probably look it up. It's probably a World's Finest, okay? But yeah, this right here. I always thought this was Dick Grayson, and it turns out it's just part of the mystery, right? This is how I ended up reading a lot of Batman and things like that. There was no cover and stuff on them, right? So I would pick up in the middle of a story and have to figure out what was going on, try to play detective. But yeah, there's some Superman in this, so it's probably a World's Finest. Things like that. Here's the same thing with some Superman stories, and they had a reprint of a Supergirl in it when she was Linda going to college. Yeah, and like I said, this is the stuff of Superman I absolutely love. I like the Fortress of Solitude with the giant key. That's a marker for planes, letting know what direction to go in or which way is north. This one is from 1980. I don't know why this is in such bad shape from 80. I bet somebody brought him some comic books, or he picked it up at a yard sale or something. Who knows? The Children's Executioner. And then here's some pieces. I've upgraded this. Here's some pieces of the cover. Giant Size Fantastic Four #2. So it's going to be in this stack coverless. I have replaced this. I have an issue somewhere with it. And then this was great because, like, all I can figure out is that somebody's written their name on this. This is nothing but the cover, right? They've written their name on this, and I'm betting you anything this is one of the books that the stepdad had took a, the grandmother, his mom had given away to his friends, and as soon as they got it, they wrote their name on it so he couldn't come back and claim it. And then here's some Flash Gordon Gold Key books. This was mine. Of course, if I'm thinking this is the issue, this is probably the issue with the infamous cover of with the shark on it. There's two versions of it. Luckily, I have two versions of it. Yeah, but I didn't know, the whole shark thing was cool. This was on Saturday mornings. I would watch my cartoon morning Saturdays would end with Flash Gordon. You can find them on Tubi for free. I have them on DVD also. The first season is fantastic. It's actually serialized. And then I would go to get picked up by one of my friends, and one of my mom's friends would take her kids skating at noon, and they would pick me up. So I would watch my cartoons and go skating as a kid and be out there by myself. There's so much I did by myself when I was little. I love the 80s Superman books. I used to love Bartok's. I wished I'd known that. I've got Bartok stuff I got to get. I got to rebag and stuff, right? Bartok's, the thinly veiled Sean Connery, if you will. Sean Connery. All right, and then there were some fun things in here from 71. Top Cat, The Luckiest Day. Okay. I was a big Beagle Boys fan. Of all things, it was the Beagle Boys, right? And then here's an oversized Superboy. This thing is just disintegrated. And like I said, the Insect Queen, the Lana Lang Insect Queen, the whole thing, I absolutely dug this. I thought this was great. I would love to see the Insect Queen used more. I know she popped up in the Legion of Superheroes. But as a kid, I thought that was the coolest thing, to have a ring that would make you into an insect, give you the powers of the insect, but it could only be used one time for each insect. And then I have an issue of Superboy where, to get around that, all of a sudden Lana was like, "I'm sorry, Superboy. I thought I told you I can only turn into a grasshopper one time." And all of a sudden, the alien that gave her the ring popped up in the corner of the panel, hung his head out of his spaceship, and went, "Hey, we've taken that away. You can use it as much as you want." It flies off 2 panels. That's how they got around a plot point. They just got to the point. I mean, look at this stuff, man. This was so cool when I was a kid. And there's a costume. Yeah. Anyway, and then this Robinson Crusoe book. I don't know if I'm pretty sure I've replaced this. I know that this is the I'm going blank. Dick Van Dyke. I know this is the Dick Van Dyke Disney adaptation. I think I have a copy of it restored. I read this over and over. And there's another book I read around the same time, and I've always been convinced it was an Oliver Twist adaptation. I know it was like a Gold Key or Adele or something, but the only thing I remember from it is I thought it was the Artful Dodger. I read this when I was a kid, right? But I remember the pages plain as day. But they bring them in. There's a bunch of kids standing around, and an old man, and they're in a dark room. In the middle of it is a dummy in Victorian clothes. This is like 1800s. And they've got little bells on all over the dummy, and they're teaching them how to pickpocket. And when you can pick the pockets without the bells ringing, you're ready to go. I have tried to find that comic forever, and that's all I have to go on. I always assumed that maybe it was Oliver Twist, and that was the Artful Dodger. Hulk #200, where we go into the mind of was it Thunderbolt Ross? Anyway, he goes into the mind of the Hulk is actually shrunk down. They do Fantastic Journey for the 200th issue. I just recently purchased one with a cover. This was the Hulk story I read over and over and over. And when he gets inside the mind with Samson telling him what to do, he's attacked. and the brain makes antibodies of all the Hulk's enemies, the Abomination, the Juggernaut, God, who's Shaper of Worlds and stuff. Where'd they go? The Missing Link, excuse me. Yeah. So he's fighting all of his enemies and stuff inside the brain of someone with a helmet on until he gets to the real monster. So I'm telling you, man, good days ahead. And like I said, this actually helps because I thought we had the actual Thor issue of the People Breeders, but it was a Mighty Thor Spectacular. I really feel like we had that. So I was all in with the High Evolutionary. Some incredible Bob Brown artwork with Daredevil. I still love this book. I don't know if I've replaced it. It's 113, but you have a brooding Batman and stuff that you usually see on top of a gargoyle. Well, in my mind, I had the Daredevil, and this is pre Frank Miller. So this was the Daredevil book that I loved, and when I would get to read some other ones with Black Widow and stuff, I was always very disappointed. And I always loved when they ended up in the swamp. I think Steve Gerber wrote this. Yeah, Steve Gerber, because whenever they ended up in the swamp, you had the Man Thing pop up. So I was like, here we go. And I tell you what, man, if I had my giant sized Man Thing out, I would show it to you. I'm just letting you know, right? So we're going to skip over here. This all ties in together because now you're starting to understand how I was reading things, because there's an Iron Man annual number 5, coverless, that had the Man Thing in a wicked Steve Gerber story. This is still a fantastic story, and we got an upgrade of it. Looks like I need to rebag it. So this is also one of my favorite comics. This is a stack that I get out every now and then and read. But it was wild reading this, man. This was like, there's a part of this where it's like Goonies, 7 or 8 years before they happened. You know what I mean? Like, it was kids in the swamp, and little girl drowns in the swamp. She finds the Molecule Man's staff that he put his essence in, and she becomes what was called a hermaphrodite back then. Yeah, so let's hope they can get the algorithm. But yeah, excuse me, Invincible Iron Man King Size Annual number 3. So that was one when I was a kid. So yeah, Steve Gerber, man, good stuff there, right? Gladiator Strikes Back. This was one of the first comic books I bought with my own money. We got the 3-pack again. Even as a kid, I was trying to get those deals. You know what I mean? Even as a kid, it was just nature. This one actually came with a Batman comic, the first appearance of Lucius Fox that I still have. That's how the 3-pack worked. At least that's how I remember it, guys. I mean, I could be mistaken. You know what I mean? That's not one of his. And then we have things like this. I remember the advertisements from the Stepdad's collection. You know what I mean? This is when I told you I love everything about a good comic, man. I would read everything that was in there, even the ads. I learned what a gutter was in between the comics, the splash page. I learned the terminology somehow, but this is a Lost in Space beat up issue. I'll never know what issue. Not real worried about it. And I dug Lost in Space. It was on TBS. I would find years later. And the great thing about this is I remember it has a catalog. There we go. So we would get the Sears books, and go through them for years, around Christmas time, pointing at toys and looking at them stuff. And then you would also have them in comic books and stuff, right? So yeah, this is just great stuff. I kind of laugh because I think of the spider aliens from Mars and stuff. I kind of understood Bowie. Well, I knew of Bowie. I'm not saying I comprehended him. I love what's up? Hey, what's up, comic collector? Thomas Bagley. As a kid, I was lured towards getting more bang for my buck too. Team books with many characters or giant size annuals or anniversaries were my siren call. Same thing. That's why I got All-Star Squadron, Justice League. But I was cantankerous, where the few people I did know, the older kids, Mike Kessner and his 2 buddies and stuff mostly. But when I would hear people brag or read in the comic books about something being hugely popular, I'm still like that a little bit. I was so cantankerous. I was like, well, I'll go over here. I wanted the next big thing. When everybody is on X-Men and Teen Titans, I'm over here looking at this. You know what I mean? I was doing Batman and the Outsiders. You know what I'm saying? I hate that this is going on. So my big mistake is around 2010, 2011, I got a bunch of the Stepdad's Amazing Spider-Man. The Stegron and Lizard stories stick out of my head the most. Okay. Uh, Doctor Strange, Kazar. I think it was a Marvel 2-in-1 reprints of 13 and 14 or something. Who knows? It was deluxe edition of a few things, those treasury editions, right? But he had a ton of this, and this is the storyline where Aunt May and Doc Ock were dating, which is wild, right? As you can see, it's falling apart. I read the hell out of these, right? Well, back in 2010 or 11, the stepdad had part one of Gwen Stacy's death. Okay, issue 121, 122, somewhere right in there. And I have a beat up copy of the second appearance of the Punisher in the 130s, right? So when I made the eBay lot, I messed up and I accidentally put part one of the death of Gwen Stacy. Uh, in the eBay lot instead of the second or third appearance of the Punisher. And we did have the first appearance of the Punisher in the books in this run and stuff, right? I think the stepdad probably sold that one on his own or something. There's no way that disappeared with anything, right? So yeah, that's my big thing. I had part one of the new era, the Spider-Man story. You know what I'm saying? Here we go. Here's the Two Gun Kid. This is what I read the hell out of. I dug the Two Gun Kid out of all of them, and it turns out he had a secret identity. So they did that for kids, I'm sure. And then, like I said, variety makes makes for great reading. So there's this Captain Action. I have no idea if the stepdad had these toys when he was a kid or anything, but I always dug. I totally got that was a silly costume even back then. Like you got that feel of the 60s from it. You know what I mean? But it's how dramatic it is out in the rain, carrying this kid. I mean, it's right there. I mean, how can you not get sucked into that, right? So yeah, I kept this one for the cover. I'm sure I've read this, but I never was really that interested as a kid. Here's some a coverless copy of Fantastic Four. 2010. I've said it many times. I had, turns out, 2 comic book boxes stolen off the back of a U-Haul when I was moving out of Roanoke, Virginia. And they got my Hulk run and my Jack Kirby Marvel stuff, Fantastic Four stuff, right? So this is issue 84 from 1968. This is what I was reading as a kid. And they did have a Fantastic Four cartoon back then. Here is that super special of the Fantastic Four. I always loved how they individualized him a little bit. Johnny had his red costume. Medusa was a member. John Mishima getting on there. Yeah. So, yeah, Fantastic Four way back. I'm not sure. This may be the death of, probably not, but death of Aqua Baby or something that was out there. And then we get into the good stuff. Mike Ploog. When I was 5 years old, the stepdad was going to a community college. We went to the community college, and I work beside the community college now. That blows my mind, near it. And anyway, in the auditorium, they were showing what was it, 8mm, 16mm. It was reel to reel. And I'm surrounded by a bunch of hippies that lived out on, missed out on the love. Everybody smells like cigarettes and pot and weird unwashed beard stuff and denim and stuff. I know I'm sounding judgy, but these were the smells, you know what I'm saying? And they had a double feature of Wizards and Lord of the Rings by Ralph Bakshi. So this is 78, had to be about 78. And I started noticing that some of the stuff I saw reminded me of a comic book guy named Mike Ploog. So as a little kid, I was starting to put a few things together. This is a coverless copy of Frankenstein by Mike Ploog. Okay, what number is this? Number 5, 1973. So yeah, this stuff right here, I've got a ton of these in assorted, well-loved conditions, if you will, right? And then again, Steve Gerber again. Yeah, Guardians of the Galaxy, Planet of the Absurd. This is one of those comics I read over and over because they land on a planet that ends up looking like they were in the woods, but they end up on a rooftop. It looks like 1970s New York, and all these different aliens are out and about living their life a lot like New York. Turns out to be Asylum, and they built that society themselves. When they meet the jailers, they tell them and stuff, right? I think Captain Action was written by Jim Shooter and was DC's first comic based on a toy line. I will take a look at that. Yeah, Vartex appears in the second Power Girl series. Vartex there, that the two specific issues that I have. Like I think I've already took upstairs. I have the Power Girl cover with Vartex on it, and I have it back to back with the original Superman comic where Vartex is in the same pose. Right? They did an homage, if you will. Right? Like I said, we're just having fun, guys. Right? So if you're here, make sure you subscribe, like it. Hit the button, hit all the buttons, man. Make sure you give it a thumbs up, share it. We're just hanging out. Here's some old Submariner from back in the day. I had the first appearance of Stingray in the Stepdad's collection. You got to have some Flash, right? I was a Flash fanatic. Um, Here's some more of that Robin Caruso book with Dick Van Dyke. So I need to go back and get those ripped out pages with it. But I read this over and over. I thought this was fantastic when I was a kid. I mean, over and over. It's a Disney comic, no doubt about it. And also, like I said, they had the toys in it, the fun catalog. But yeah, I absolutely dug it, right? And then we had the Ghost Rider on it, man. I have, good grief, man. This is from 1979, all right? So this was bought new, probably I feel like it was the same day I got my Legion of Superheroes book, Superboy and the Legion. And Night of the Flame Cycles, man, if I'm remembering right, there's a part in this I thought was really cool because there's a pool with a ladder and a diving board, and he rides up the ladder and his motorcycle goes off the diving board, sets the whole pool on fire. And I was like, whoa. So let's take a look. This is issue number 37 from 1979. Man, I just thought it was cool. It had a pimp in it. That's what cracked me up. But this book felt evil when I was reading it as a kid. Evil, you know. Oh man. Give me just a second, guys. I just got to know. It's going to kill me if I'm wrong, because that means I'm going to have to find the Ghost Rider book in my head. Nope, there it is. I don't know if it's going to show up. I thought that was the freak. I pictured that perfectly in my head. Yeah, he rode over the water, up the ladder, off the diving board, and set everything on fire. I was just like, as a kid who loved riding his bike, I'm sure I imagined flames being left behind me when I was doing probably that good 20 miles per hour downhill or something. So, little Chippendale, and not that kind of Chippendale, no bow ties here. Some more Hulk, man. Len Wein, Herb Trimpe, Fury at 50,000 volts from 1975, 74. What's the number? Number 183. So I'm going to have to look and see what that's up. Yeah, so Hulk was all over the house also. And then I had my Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, dude, where I learned that not everything is free just because it says it's free. There's a lesson in every one of them, right? And also, do not drink after this man. All right? Do not do it. I'm just saying. Little iffy here. Here's some more. Fat Albert. Loved Fat Albert. I can still sing the song in my head. I am still a Pink Panther nut as a kid. All right. I thought it's probably from the Pink Panther movies where you had the animated stuff. And I remember I could never find the Pink Panther cartoons on. And when I did, I always caught them at towards the end. I could never figure out when they were on. Inspector Clouseau. Thank goodness that on YouTube you have an official Pink Panther channel where you can watch all this. They even have blocks that you can watch where it's all the Inspector Clouseau cartoons or this cartoon of it. And Amazon has them divided by years, by the seasons and stuff, right? Still watch this stuff. And then we got the greatest thing that I could ever think of as a kid. All it needed was a Bigfoot to make it perfect because I'm from that era. But it was Turok, Son of Stone. Man, fighting all those honkers and stuff right in the Lost Valley. Yeah, this is from 1970. Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. The variety is what got me. I always sort of knew that these comics felt a little bit cheaper than DC and Marvel for some reason. Even back then, I was able to pick up that these weren't the big companies, but I still thought they were the stuff. And they were a little sanitized. I didn't have that. They felt safe. You know what I mean? I could tell that this was like I'm reading G versions of comics, and some of that Marvel stuff is a little PG, and DC, you just never knew what you were going to get. And that's why I probably read a lot of the horror. All right. I had the same problem with finding Pink Panther on TV. The same with Tennessee Tuxedo and Chumley. They came on at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings and reruns when I was a kid. Underdog was 9:30 on Sundays. The Sunday cartoons were so different. I always had a hard time finding Muttley. Not to get into it. Oh my God, I can't remember one blank. You know, the dog with the trench coat, and he would laugh like that. So when Laugh Olympics came on, I thought that was Muttley. And it wasn't Muttley. It was a different dog. It wasn't Dastardly and Muttley and stuff, right? But the reason I had a hard time finding them is I really got upset when I was a little kid because they would show a commercial with Muttley, and I had to know what this was, right? And I remember my mom actually saying, "We can't make it. Come on." So yeah, I was that kid. I have to know the story and stuff, right? Okay, so this book, starting with these and the Superboy and the Legion, these are the books I keep on the shelf, right? These are the ones I have the most vivid memories of reading. Okay, Herbie and the Spirits. So when I was a Watchmen nut, imagine my enthusiasm when I found out that Alan Moore, this was one of his favorite books, right? Herbie and the Spirits. I probably got 2 or 3 other issues laying around here, but this was the one from the Stepdads collection from the 60s. The whole thing, everything about it was just so bizarre. I was trying to figure out where this was going, and it just was like so unpredictable, and ridiculous, right? I got some of my comics that I bought as a kid that it was so odd. I was still buying comics. There was a lot of great stuff that I was buying and everything like that. But it blows my mind when I would get these other comics where I'm like, people need to get off their X-Men and read some of these great comics and give them a chance and stuff, right? And one of those things was this particular issue of Tales of the Green Lantern Corps, #1. I absolutely love this. It might be time for a rereading and stuff, right? This thing is beat up. It was 1985, guys. This is right in the middle of crisis going on. I'm like, they need to read this. Issue 325 of The Flash. I had to get it because of this cover. Plus, it had a Superman movie sweepstakes in it. But that cover, I had to spend my 60 cents and probably missed out on getting a G.I. Joe or something, right? And I was a Byrne fan before I realized I was a Byrne fan in 1985. This cover of this is a replacement. My newsstand copy is around here somewhere beat up. Power Man and Iron Fist, that was one. And this is my original Warlord. This cover, I have recreated this cover many times, like, dude, it's almost a cheat. I got a mint copy kind of framed and stuff, but the Mike Grell Warlord covers just blew me away. Still one of my favorite comics, not just Stepdad's Collection nostalgia or something. I think is one of the best, and I need to really rebag this. One of the best comics I read as a kid was this What If Conan Walked the Earth Today? And there's my upgrade. That was the Stepdads. Conan was everywhere. And this is one of the few times of Conan being in modern times actually works, even though it's a what if. Now, what's wild about this is you see that redhead. Her name is Danny in the book. At the time, Roy Thomas, who wrote this, was dating Danny. She would become Danny Thomas. She has written Young All Stars and Doctor Strange. She became part of his writing partner years later if they got married. Well, he puts her in this comic and she sleeps with Conan. He put his girlfriend in the book and then had her sleep with Conan. Yeah, you know. Then this one, for years, I thought this story in this one of my favorite stories because I am a Twilight Zone nut, and this reprint story is from the 60s. There's no doubt in my mind that Stan Lee was writing a Twilight Zone story, but it ended up being Uncanny Tales from the Grave for Marvel, not DC. I thought it was a Tales of the Unexpected, and it's a story called The Toy Soldiers, and it has a in my opinion, this is not official, but this is the way a little kid read things. I'm like, that's Peter Parker when he was a kid. And I'm like, is that Uncle Ben in Aunt May? Or is that his actual parents and stuff, right? But that is one of my favorite comic book panels of all time, where we have the little kid who's playing with his little tin soldiers from the Civil War, and we have an alien cross a dimensional barrier. This is from the 60s. That is so freaking ahead of its time, I feel like. Um, when I first got online and I was doing message boards in the early 2000s, that was my avatar forever. Yeah, this is so good. Anyway, Uncanny Tales from the Grave. That was still one of my favorites. Could have a bit of a nostalgic feel to it. I don't know. And then here we go, guys. I've got to upgrade this one. Okay. Creepy Tales from Charlton Comics #2. I have an issue of Surfing Wheels. I have some war stories. The stepdad had quite a few Charlton comics in there, and there was a few of them E-Man and things like that. I didn't dig them, but what I did dig is when they would have a kid in them out in the swamp playing, because in the trailer park I lived in, we had like some mud that smelled like sulfur or something. It was just nasty, and we had a river, and then we had a big little mountain, and we had a patch of woods and all this stuff. And all of a sudden, it's like I could smell this swamp from where I lived, right? This last story here, right? This Creepy Tales. And the story is called Slimes, Slogs, and Glumps. And he's chasing frogs. And he ends up catching a frog, but he loses the frog when this girl comes up. And she gives him this weird creature that she found in the swamp, and he ends up taking it home and hiding it. And maybe this cover has something to do with the story. I don't know. Love this book. This book, I've read this and I need to go freaking take a shower. So it's one of those books. All right, 2 more here, guys. You got any comments? You better leave them now. Okay. And then, I told you Thor was all over the place. Here's the original. This blew my mind. This is from 1977. So I actually probably read this as soon as it entered the house. But this is the Thor annual, -- 6, where Thor stops some people robbing a bank or something. And they just happen to have a thermonuclear device. It starts getting ready to go off, and Thor spins his hammer, creates a vortex, and as it explodes, he's thrust a couple thousand years in the future, floating through space, turns to ice, and is found by the Guardians of the Galaxy in their ship, a la the Avengers finding Captain America in an iceberg in Avengers, #4. So they're retelling the tale. And Korvac, guys. Yes, I was introduced to Korvac in this before the Korvac saga. And there's my upgrade, right? So this, in the midst of Star Wars and colorful alien creatures and everything, this is the zeitgeist of 1977 in a world where you can divide time by before Star Wars, BSW, and after Star Wars, ASW. And that's how I like to look at the world, right? That is it, and that is perfect. And then I just happen to have these. I shot a video where I was going to talk about, the pitfalls of hoarding comics and stuff, where you end up buying multiple copies of Legion of Superheroes. But this is where I was at when everybody was like really digging the X-Men. I'm over here getting the Legion of Substitute Heroes and enjoying things like Ambush Bug and All-Star Squadron and Crisis on Infinite Earths, Fantastic Four, a little bit of Alpha Flight every now and then, a bunch of those team books. So anyway, guys, that's just me reminiscing, going through some stuff here. But I'm going to have to rebag a lot of this stuff too. So I'm glad I got it out. But yeah, those are some of the books that I remember reading as a kid in the late 70s, as you can obviously see, until the early 80s, right? So yeah, we got to, sometimes you just got to give the devil its due, that I was very fortunate to be able to find my own way by having all this stuff around me. You know what I mean? And I was still going outside and riding my Space Invaders bike and getting dirty and playing in the woods and doing all that stuff. Did spend a lot of time by myself, and I wasn't watching my little brother and my little sister coming along and stuff like that, man. But like I said, I feel very fortunate to be exposed to this stuff, right? So anyway, guys, thanks for hanging out with me. Make sure you have liked the video. Make sure you're subscribed. Hit the bell. Read your comic books, and everybody be excellent to each other. Enjoy the day.